Welcome to the Coalition Corner podcast brought to you by Caribbean vulnerable communities, and in which we discuss critical issues in the HIV and human rights response across the Caribbean. In this special episode, we'll be looking at World AIDS Day 2023 and its theme, Let Communities Lead. We have for this discussion today Dr. Richard Amenyah, Multi-Country Director at UNAIDS, based here in Jamaica. And we also have with us Mrs. Kandasi Levermore, who is Executive Director at Jamaica AIDS Support for Life. In this discussion, we want to look at what is happening in respect of the work of communities and also discuss how communities can get greater involvement in World AIDS Day activities 2023. So welcome, Richard and Kandasi. Excited to have you on this episode of our podcast. Richard, I want to start with you. From Ghana to the Caribbean.
Sure.
Tell us just a brief bit about that journey from there to here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's really lively to be part of this wonderful show. I'm from Ghana, as you indicated. I work for UNAIDS. I've been in UNAIDS since 2014, and it has led me to the regional office in Senegal, Dakar. I've been to Burkina Faso. I've also worked in West and Central Africa in general. And before coming here, I was in Nigeria. I spent about 6 years in Nigeria and working with very interesting and lovely people, communities. And coming here was a passion because it's my first time in the Caribbean. And you know, Ghana and its connection with the Caribbean. And I was really looking up to be here. And when I came, I realized I have family here. You know, all of you are my family, and life has been interesting. And my work is progressing because of families like you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Can they say Gibraltar to all of this work? Growing up in Gibraltar, you saw yourself in this?
Thanks for having me, Ivan. Gibraltar, Nip Street to be exact. No, I mean, I know I'd do good things. I'd be somebody. I'd contribute to society and I'd be giving back to my country. I always thought that in my early years. Always been very involved in the community through my church and my school and my youth club. So it's not an unlikely end in terms of where I am now. But I've been grateful for the opportunity. I've been working in development now for 2 decades and more. And started in youth and community development. And really it has brought me to communities, as it says. And not just geographic, but, you know, groups of people and the dynamics and what it means to mobilize and get people involved and participating. And so it's a lot of development work over the years. And I'm happy I'm at Jamaica AIDS Support for Life. It has really provided me an opportunity to serve, and one that allows you to really bring yourself to it and think about the interest of others as you do it. And it's a family there, really. People, I know sometimes it can be a turn-off for some people when they say work is family, but that's the environment that we have created over the 30-odd years existence of the organization, and we continue to thrive because we put people at the center. And it's just been wonderful. It's been a great time and journey.
Great. It's interesting because the comment from both of you seems to fit quite easily within the theme for this World AIDS Day. It's about communities, about ensuring that communities have a leadership role in the HIV response. Richard, you're coming from several places and you land in the Caribbean. Just share a little bit about your initial thoughts as you have been here since you have about what our HIV response looks like. So can you give us a little sense of, you know, how you're seeing it?
Sure, thank you. I think the HIV response, we've made some progress, and we've also learned along the line. And over 4 decades that we have AIDS in this world, it took civil society, it took communities to be at the forefront as activists, as volunteers, as passionate people trying to save other people's lives and also saves their own lives, And it is through the work of civil society and communities that we have treatment coming to places like Ghana or Nigeria or Jamaica or St. Lucia or Guyana or anywhere. Because hitherto, the drugs were just centered at the global north. But civil society voices said, no, it is not moral, it's unethical. And some people, though they could afford the drugs, decided not to take the drugs in protest, that I will not take the drug until other vulnerable people have access to those drugs. And for me, that is the beauty of celebrating communities. And for 35 years now that we're celebrating World AIDS Day, I think communities have been at the forefront. And it is always very important that government and civil society are seen as partners working together towards a common cause and a common goal.
Yeah. It's very interesting you say that, Richard, because, if you go back to the early days of activism, when people responded because people were dying, they saw their friends dying, that's how Jamaica AIDS Support for Life started, and a lot of the movements that we have started because people became passionate about how do we support our community. Sure. And so for us to be celebrating World AIDS Day under the theme, or commemorating World AIDS Day under the theme, because I like to say that World AIDS Day is supposed to be a point of celebrating our successes, but also a reflection on the challenges that remain. And I think to do it under the theme, let communities lead, seems to me to be quite appropriate at this point in time. It's a recognition of the value of communities and the need for communities to remain vital, even as the response progresses and changes.
Exactly.
So I'm very excited about the theme. And Kandasi, from where you sit, what does the theme mean to you and folks around you in the work that you're doing?
Oh, it's such an interesting theme, and it's a timely theme. Timely theme for a number of reasons. The concept of leadership, sometimes we think about leadership, we're always thinking about the person at the top. And one of the first things you learn is that you lead from anywhere. Start where you are. And the truth is that's what communities have done. They have, in terms of when we look at our work, where we're inserting ourselves, where we are taking leadership and making our voices heard, we're doing it at all levels. And even in Jamaica, sometimes when we talk about the HIV response and we think about what happened globally for things to happen, here it was no different. Really, it was always the voice of the people, the activism, the pushing up, showing up, even when we were not wanted in spaces, how it is that we found ourselves in those spaces. And so it's very important at this time for those reasons, but more so because so many things have happened in HIV progressively, positively. It's not looking like what it used to look, that, for people to be so passionate about it then. What can happen to a community is that it can get complacent. And so at such a time as this, it is important to remind the communities even that we are not there yet. Remember, initially we wanted to see the end of this thing, and all our work so far has taken us thus far, but we need to keep the fire. We need to, still continue to take up spaces, still continue to lead from where we are, inserting ourselves in processes and making sure that when we are at the table, we make use of it, because we are not representatives of ourselves, but representatives of communities. And so it's very timely, and I think it will serve to rejuvenate, revitalize the local communities, to recognize their roles and responsibilities, and to reignite the fire that needs to happen to take us the extra miles.
Yeah. For me, this reigniting the fire is such an important thing, because I think a lot of us have gotten tired.
Yes, true.
We have been fighting and we feel like we're just battling. And I think there's a part of us that wants to give up. I mean, Kandasi, you and I have had this conversation a lot.
You're going deep.
Should we not just come off the radar and go find something, do? I like always to say, I really want to go do some farming. time to get out of this and go and do some farming. But the truth is that that fire is still needed because we are not yet at the end. And I think, Richard, what was from UNAIDS, because the theme has come and UNAIDS this is what UNAIDS is helping us to think, to reflect on. So from UNAIDS, what are some of the hurdles that remain that, communities, the leadership of communities is so critical for us to be able to overcome those hurdles? What are some of those?
Okay, good. The UN Secretary General has encouraged all member states to open up the civic space and actually engage member government, to more or less renew their social contracts with civil society, And this is critical because as a UN, we recognize that when you open up the civic space, there is freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of assembly. And so the diverse voices of people are heard. And interestingly, in the 2021 Political Declaration on AIDS, our leaders made a promise to create and maintain an open, safe, and enabling environment for civil society, and for them to end AIDS as a public health threat. So they recognize the relevance of civil society. But the question you ask is a very good question. What are still the stumbling blocks? In some countries, there are policy barriers, regulatory barriers, that depending on even the type of population that you are focusing on, you can't even be registered.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about key populations, LGBTQ organizations, community-based organizations. If it is tilted towards certain marginalized groups that some governments abhor, they really will not even register you officially. But you need to be registered. Opening up the civic space that is safe and protective means that you are better placed to connect with the population that government can't do it. Because there are spaces that government cannot enter, but civil society will effortlessly, just enter those spaces. So in the policy front, we are more or less repositioning the relevance of civil society. We want to reignite the relevance of civil society, as you have really said. And we want to get policymakers and everybody reimagine what civil society can do to drive us to the last mile that we currently have. Civil society groups are different levels. Some of them have capacity challenges, which we recognize.
Yeah.
But others actually have all the potential, the expertise, and the competencies, like CVZ, like JASL. You don't need to start from ground zero.
Yes.
Because you've gone through over the time. And funding is one of the biggest challenges. Without funding, you can't do much. You can have a voice at the policy front, but civil society should not just have a voice. They should be part of planning, implementation, even allocation of resources, and monitoring and performance evaluation. Yeah. So when we are all there, then there is that meaningful and greater participation and involvement of civil society. So we know without civil society, public health programs don't succeed.
At all.
Tina, Richard, it's very interesting you say that, especially that last point to end on, because there is a recognition, I see, and I've seen a number of different countries now recognizing that beyond HIV, the role of civil society and communities in other disease responses is critical to get us where we need to go, just across health generally.
Yes.
So I don't know that it is the idea about letting communities lead, even though we are doing it in the context of World AIDS Day and the HIV, I think it's a concept which needs to be more broadly applied to letting communities lead in our national development responses, because there's a critical role that communities can play across the board, whether it is in health, education, other areas. So very, very important.
And even in the last retreat, that we held in Montego Bay, led by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, it was clear. The policy people there said that they want to take the benefits of HIV, and apply it to other areas.
Exactly.
In terms of right-based approaches, how HIV has strengthened advocacy and ensuring that everybody has a stake, and I think those are the things we need to celebrate. How do we make the responses sustainable, involving both civil society and then the state actors?
Right.
Yeah, but even before you ask the question, it's really development 101.
Sure.
That you cannot do for people that which you do not know of or you have not engaged to find out, because you could have gone ahead and done a whole thing and then nobody accessed the service.
Sure.
So the reality is that there's so much learning in HIV, but it only serves a nation. It fulfills its best interests when the people that are a part of the country get an opportunity to be involved, so that it can tell you what the needs are in a real way, not that what you think it is, and to talk about how those needs can be met and how they can play a role in fulfilling even their own needs. And hence, communities, you just cannot leave communities behind.
Okay. It is about not doing for us, but helping us to do what
Olive would say nothing for us without us. Nothing for us without us.
So it is about coming in and saying to communities, look here, help me understand what I can do to help you.
That's it.
To get to where you want to go.
Where you want to be.
Exactly.
So that you can also realize this vision of a place of choice.
So you're giving people an opportunity, you're giving communities an opportunities to define their own destiny.
Yeah.
Their own
and
path
that is
ahead.
where the complementarity comes in.
Yes.
So I'm excited about, the possibilities of communities leading. Can they say, you have been in this thing for a while, and we have seen community engagement sort of swing along the pendulum. What would you say is the current state of community engagement and the community response in Jamaica at this point in time? And are there any lessons that can be used as we engage in this celebratory period?
Yeah, when we look at communities, I think honestly, we have to acknowledge that we're in a kind of different paradigm, maybe, in terms of persons' level of wanting to be engaged and wanting to be involved. I mean, I think on one hand, persons have become a little bit more polar, just generally. Everybody's thinking about I think there's a shift in the culture.
We talk on social media. We don't.
Yes,
we don't engage the way that we normally. So
we no longer go into if you go across the country, just don't think about HIV. You go across the country, you look at the community centers and stuff. Where in our days, where they were the life centers of a physical space, a physical community. You think about the activities that used to happen in the community. I think about things like Labor Day and what used to happen in the community. You think about independence and what used to happen. The truth is, those things are not necessarily happening. But is there a space for us to be, and are we being? I think yes. What has happened is there is a recreation of what a community space looks like. So if we're talking about involvement and where they are, I see communities gathering in the World Wide Web, I like to say. A lot of things have moved to social media. A lot of things are not necessarily face-to-face. People tend to galvanize when there's an issue, because other than me being impacted by something, then, maybe there is nothing to do. But you have to, Ivan, give kudos to organizations working in HIV and how the communities have continued to show up. I am very proud of the work in Jamaica when we look at the Civil Society Forum and what has happened with that over the years. How, despite the lull in our general response as a country, here are a group of civil society organizations that still understand that they have to show up and show out and do what is necessary to keep the communities engaged. Can we do with some more support? Yes. I think in terms of our strategies, they might be a little outdated because of all the developments that have happened. So we have to look to see, in this era, how are we now going to mobilize communities and keep communities engaged? Because you'll hear more organizations saying, they might have, less membership, people are moving on once their needs are met. And these are just general group dynamics in any situation. But we might need to look a little bit more on what new ways we need to engage communities and to get them mobilized and to stay engaged. But you have to be realistic. People, generally, you will have peaks when people are needed. If people don't feel that there's something that is needed at this time, they'll go into a lull. And so you have to find a way that at least we can maintain a steady balance. And then when we do need the peaks, then we can do it. But that people do not completely lose touch of
but
the
Ivan,
community.
It's interesting that in the Caribbean, civil society realizes that there are gaps. But I can tell you, you are far ahead in terms of your visibility and affecting policy, showing up and making your voices heard in policy making and actually shifting the pendulum on punitive laws, archaic laws that are not even implemented, even though they are on the books, And in the Caribbean, you've seen the courts listening to civil society and changing colonial laws, decriminalizing and realizing that, look, privacy is important, confidentiality is important, human rights is important, equality is important.
Yes.
So in as much as there are challenges, I still think that we need to celebrate how far we have come. We are not out of the woods yet, but it is still important that those wins, let's celebrate those wins and then realize that we are crystallizing the challenges that are left. Can you imagine without the voices of civil society where the Caribbean will be?
We'll be too far back.
Sure.
We definitely wouldn't be here.
Kandasi, you raised something, and it's something that I've been reflecting on over the past few years around. So we know that civil society is strong, but we are finding, as you say, that the level of engagement by the community, the membership of the communities is sort of on a up and down. And there are times that we are concerned about whether or not there is sufficient level of engagement with the broader membership, the base of the, as we normally say, of the community. How do you think we can, the very thing that you asked, how do you think we can engage to make sure that they are kept on board for when the big issue comes that you need their support? What can we do? Because I remember back in the days when we used to have gatherings.
Yes, man.
Very regularly, people would meet. I go back to my days of Jessel. Every so often, we bring them together. We have meetings. We discuss topics. But as you say, people are now meeting in social media spaces. Is that where we should be going to continue to engage them and expect that when we need them for a big issue that they're present? Or are there other ways that we probably can continue to engage them?
It's one way, but it can't be the only way. What social media can do for us is to keep people informed. And so I think, again, kudos to the organizations, not just Jamaica, across the region, where we try to make sure that we are in the social media spaces, we are putting information out there, and believe it or not, our base, they are seeing the information. But I do think that we have to create opportunities for people to physically connect. Let me just use a simple example. Coming out of COVID, where we were on Zoom, there was just this level of how many more Zoom meetings could we have continued with? Even though sometimes we say, listen, turn on your cameras. We need to feel people.
To feel you.
But even then, even now, we have to go to a mix because there are some things we say, no, this is something we have to sit down face to face and talk about. And I think we have to create those spaces. We have to do some of what we did back then, Ivan. Create these spaces and bring the community. And we have to be creative because the reality is some of these things, Richard alluded to it, we have resource challenges. But I think we can be creative. Giving you like a very quick example. We facilitated a hike with some community members. And we said, give a little contribution, but you're not paying for it. We are offsetting the cost. And when we went on the hike, let's say we spent a whole weekend in the Blue Mountains, right? And let's say we had about 40 people, definitely not the entire community, but we had 40 people. And just the conversation over a campfire, what you get from that, you cannot get it over social media. You cannot get it. The connections you make, people understanding bigger picture and seeing where the gaps exist and how they have to play a role to help us fill in those gaps. It was like, everybody was like, wow, the hike we never knew we needed. And the craving is about how are we going to create more of these spaces just for people to be and to have conversations. That is what pushed us in the early days. Remember, when I think about, I pretend I was at the beginning at Jessel, but from the stories I have heard, it was those consistent meetups and greet-ups that really created all that we are benefiting from now as an organization. So we have to go back to that, Ivan. I don't think it is okay for civil society to just operate within the confines of our, as articles of association and whatever. We have to find a way where we engage our base. Whether it's going to be town hall meetings or beach link-ups or, smaller group sessions, just where people don't feel that every time that we are talking to them, it is when we need you to come now because this is happening. People need to know, understand the progression, see the build-up, and see themselves.
So the social connection
has to be a part
critical.
of it.
So it's not just about business.
No.
It's about how do we create social connections across our constituencies to make people feel that they are a part of this. So they can
something.
own the big issue when it comes.
That's it.
And actually that is the strength that civil society has.
Brings.
It is about people-to-people contact, and then communities dialoguing. And the fact is that we see communities as places of experimentation and innovation. If the approach you are using is not getting you there, you need to find another way.
And
like hiking.
It's very flexible.
Exactly.
It's a very flexible space. And I think
and
that's part of what I think as we look at how we deal with communities. Because I think as our programs become more professionalized, there is a tendency for us to sort of restrict innovation and flexibility. But one of the advantages that communities and civil society has, that advantage is the ability to be flexible. To be innovative. And I think
agile.
Agile.
That's a lovely word.
We need to harness that a lot more and rely less on the sort of more restrictive, bureaucratic approaches that oftentimes, whether it is donors or government, ask us to follow. And so while we need that balance, we can't maintain our communities with this level of rigidity and bureaucracy. It is the agility that keeps them. Because when they're drifting, we have to be agile to identify what will maintain them.
Exactly.
And to keep them coming back to the conversation. So I'm excited about what the way forward offers. I just have we're in the final segment, so pretty much I want to ask two questions. One, for you, Kandasi. If you could give me one phrase that really sums up what accounts for the success of the work that organizations like JASL and others who are directly at community level doing. If you were to give me a phrase or a sentence that sums up what contributes to that success, what would it be?
I mean, once you say give you a phrase, I can't help but it's only one phrase that can come to my mind, and it's a JASL phrase. But at JASL, we do everything with love action, and support. The idea that because we love each other and we care about each other, it will drive us to act and support each other. And that's the base, that's the base of communities even. That because we are so connected as people, then we can't just watch things go on. It's going to drive us to want to do things that ultimately support people, and everybody can be their best version of themselves and can be actualized, and optimal potential will be realized, and all these lovely things. And it sounds utopian, but no, it's not. Honestly, I have applied those 3 words to so many decisions that I have had to make at JASL as the executive director. That makes it so easy. Whenever I feel like, I'm pumped about something, because you're my sounding board a lot of times. I'm disturbed, I get antsy, and I don't know what to do. If I go back to our mantra, which is love, action, and support, the decision becomes so easy. And I'm like, well, what? It's clear. Because there has to be some consideration. That has to be the main basis for which a decision will be made. How will the organization be demonstrating love, which is the founding principle of it? And how will we need to act, and how will we support? Is it in alignment? It's similar to, sorry, I have to say it. It's like what would Jesus do kind of a thing? But it's what would a JASL do, given that this is our mantra? It works for us.
Yeah. So I really, for me, I think what I'm hearing you saying is that the successful organizations, successful community movements are underpinned by a purpose-driven philosophy.
Purpose, yeah.
That you need to identify what your purpose is and let that purpose drive you.
Be your guide, yes.
And I think
it's also about your values.
Values, the values.
Yes.
Values,
underpinned by the core value.
Yes.
And here you're talking about how you value people.
Yes.
It is
taking action,
and
supporting
you can't.
people.
So those things make it. So it's really that, Ivan.
Yeah.
It's really about what it is that we said in the beginning that we wanted to do, and what are the principles that we cannot move away from as we do what we need to do. Ultimately, how will it impact our base?
Yeah.
And then it becomes easy. And so, I'm very mindful of JASL and JASL's accomplishments. For the 30 years at each period, how we have come out of all our, the issues and the challenges that we have faced. And I see it as a good model. But I also see some of the smaller organizations, how they have learned to, coalesce around what drives them too. And how, as a group of different communities, we have had to learn what are our similarities, what are our differences, where do we need to come together, and how it is that we not just support ourselves and who we think are our direct beneficiaries and community members, but how do we help other communities to support them as well? Okay. So it's a good time. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited.
Yes.
So Ivan, for us in the United Nations, it is about equality. It's about dignity. It's about freedoms and human rights.
Right.
With a core principle, leaving no one behind. So when it comes to the world of HIV, we know we've had a lot of successes. And I think the successes that we have chalked really is making people complacent.
Yes.
But it is important, the good work that you as communities do is reminding everybody that AIDS is not yet over.
Exactly.
And it is, and the last mile is even much more difficult. And the last mile, we are talking about marginalized people, vulnerable people that are not socially acceptable. They are pushed to the fringes by draconian, punitive laws. And so the environment is not enabling. And that is why we think human rights is important. And when we are able to do that, then social justice now drives equity across board. And that is how we would end AIDS as a public health threat. Leveraging the support of everyone, especially targeting the most vulnerable and marginalized amongst us.
Yeah, but Ivan, last thing I'd like to say is how...
I have another question. It's not the
you have
last
another question? Okay. No, but on this piece, is how in knowing what those core principles and values are and how we've been able to apply it to a development area, which is HIV over the last 30 or 40 years. And now recognizing opportunities. Because when HIV goes away, there are other issues that the communities face that need attention.
And
it's going to would now need to apply in all situations. Yes. That's it.
No, excellent.
A typical example was when the pandemic happened.
Exactly.
When the pandemic happened.
We had to respond.
We had to.
The HIV Civil Society organization, we know how to deal with things like this.
We know how to go on the ground, yes.
You know, so that's a good one.
Yeah. So, Richard, what is your final message to communities across the Caribbean? We are at this particular juncture, well into what should have been our 2030 goal of ending AIDS as a pandemic, as a global pandemic. Many countries are not yet there. What would be your message to communities to support getting us there?
Countries, thank you very much. Good question. Countries that have succeeded because there was a political will by governments. So governments are important. So civil society need to understand the politics of this and making sure that where government is, they are there also. So that when they dialogue, the policy people understand exactly the core needs of the people that they serve. So that is important. Right. And once we are able to engage as equal partners with government, that we are in this storm together, then we are seen as partners. And it's a shared responsibility. Government may have the resources and may do a lot of heavy lifting, but then we'll create the space for civil society. Our government agreed onto a target we call the 30-80-60 target. And it is for civil society, that civil society should be supported to provide about 30% of the HIV testing and counseling services across populations that government cannot effectively reach. 30%. How can civil society be there, test people, link them to care and support and ensure that the continuum of care is there? So that is it. Then the second part of the target, which is the 80%, is that civil society should be given that space to reach out to the general population and also focus on some populations that are being left behind. On prevention, we are not doing well when it comes to HIV prevention. To control the HIV epidemic, we need to bring down deaths, we need to bring down new infections. And so we are saying, give the space of prevention to communities. Give the space to communities. They know how to engage the communities that are underground, the LGBTQ groups, and young people who are sexually active and also not even well informed. Communities can engage them, And then last but not the least is the 60% role that civil society needs to play, and that is creating an enabling environment. You went to the Blue Mountains. You created an environment in the Blue Mountains and dialogue, So you are creating that environment to glean critical information from people that hitherto you will not get, either on social media or anywhere. And so we think that creating that enabling environment to address issues about human rights, to address issues about stigma and discrimination, and also address the issue about law reform. That is how we create that enabling environment. As we speak now, close to 40% of Jamaicans show up late for treatment.
Treatment is a reality.
Show up late. And it tells us that we have a lot of work to do as civil society. So this World AIDS Day, our work is cut out for us as civil society groups and communities. Let's work at it and keep the promise. We must end AIDS as a public health threat.
Kandasi, you get the charge. Richard has just given the charge. So respond to that charge, but also as a community leader, what is your message to the communities as we move into this World AIDS
World
Day?
AIDS Day. I would say the charge received.
Thank you.
Sorry, charge received. I would say it's a World AIDS Day is I don't know. I take it very seriously. It's like if you don't think about certain things for the entire year and you're so busy implementing and doing things, as it gets around to December 1, you have it's a natural pause.
Yeah.
For our community, because you're reflecting and it just puts you in that place. And so for our communities, what I would say, do not lose heart.
Sure.
Sometimes I think we're spoiled, I must say, because we have done so well. So well. It's like we can't even imagine what it was like, not far ago, like 2003, 2010. We were nowhere near here. But because we are used to achieving at a certain pace and level, and we might feel like we are not moving for a few years or so, then we are getting disheartened and like, Ivan, you and I, like, I wonder if our time is finished. No, it is not. It is not. It is not. Take heart. The work, think about what would happen if we did not exist. Yeah. It definitely wouldn't be this.
Sure.
And so if, say, 3 years ago, we had all gone home to say, no, we're doing something else, and we're no longer participating in our community, then we still wouldn't have been here. And so take heart. The work is here to do. Yeah. We have achieved a lot, but there is still more work to be done. And we have what it takes. We did the work. We brought ourselves here.
Sure.
And so there is more for us to do. So we know we're feeling a little wounded. Rub it off.
Yeah.
Rub it off. We're going to put some gentian violet on them. Purple lotion, remember that? Sorry, I have to do that. We're going to put like a purple lotion on the bruises, and we're going to muscle up, and we're going to take charge. We are leaders, naturally. Sure. That is why we are the ones out there making sure that the voice of our constituents, the voices are heard. So, leading it comes so natural that we just have to act on it. We know the roles we have to play. We know where it is difficult. What is great is we are coalescing way more, and we have support in each other as communities, as constituents. So we're going to rub down each other's shoulder, pat us our back, put on with gentian violet, and we will lead, Sir Richard.
Thank you.
The communities will continue to do what they have to do.
Yeah. This conversation has been quite interesting.
Yes.
There are a couple of things that I hear coming out of it is we need, as part of how we move forward, we definitely have to find new ways of mobilizing our communities to ensure that they remain engaged. We need to empower them to be able to continue to do the good work that has been done. And I also hear that there is need for opening up even more the civic spaces, allow communities to be at the decision-making spaces, resource them to do what they need to do, and give them responsibilities in the response to make sure that we can get to those targets that we have set ourselves as a global community and as country. Guys, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm sure we're going to have you back to talk about something else. We're happy to always have you. And if you have an issue that you want us to discuss, reach out to us, and certainly we will be happy to, accommodate that conversation on the podcast.
Thank you.
It was really a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Conversations will continue.
Excellent.
It's a family discussion.
Yes.
So thank you very much for listening or watching this time, the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We do want your feedback. So as you watch us or you listen to us, please share your feedback with us, because our objective is always to present to you the best product as possible. We look forward to having you on the next podcast, and thank you very much. This is CVC Coalition Podcast. See you next time.